The room is dark. One monitor casts blue light across a desk, littered with energy drink cans and sticky notes. You think your computer is idle. You think it's resting. It isn't. Open Task Manager right now. Go ahead. Sort by network activity. You'll see it. A process called Copilot svc.exe is awake. DiagTrack, the connected user experience and telemetry service, is awake and buried 6 layers deep in a service control manager tree you were never meant to find. Recall, .exe is indexing right now at 11:14 p.m. while you sleep. This is exactly why your PC feels slow, because here's the thing. Nobody at Microsoft's Redmond campus wants trending on X right now. A cybersecurity researcher has demonstrated that malware can silently extract the data collected by Windows Recall, an AI feature that periodically captures what you're doing on your PC and uses that data to make it all searchable. Your bank account, your medical records, that search you ran at 2 a.m. that you'd rather forget. All of it, screenshotted, indexed, and sitting in a local database that, it turns out, is not as local as Microsoft promised. Recall records, snapshots of your screen every 5 seconds. It does not perform content moderation. It will not conceal your passwords. It will not hide your financial account numbers. It just watches, silently, perpetually. One security researcher described it perfectly. The vault door is titanium. The wall next to it is drywall. Microsoft's official response? They closed the investigation as not a vulnerability. Bill Gates' worst nightmare isn't a rival operating system. It's 30 million users simultaneously realizing they've been running a legal keylogger. By choice, because it came pre-installed. So let's talk about what happens when you pull the cord. When you take 30 days, wipe your drive, and run something that doesn't phone home. Something that doesn't know your name, doesn't want your telemetry, and doesn't have a hidden kill switch baked into the firmware by a company whose primary revenue model is selling your behavior patterns to advertisers. Let's talk about what happens when you go full Linux. But first, let's talk about the hardware you're running this on. Because here's where it gets uncomfortable. You spent $100 on that RTX 50 series card, maybe more. The NVIDIA Blackwell architecture was supposed to be the leap. The 575-watt TDP, the GDDR7 memory running at 28 GBPs, the Blackwell shader units, it all sounded like the future. And in benchmarks it was. But in your living room at 11:14 p.m. after 40 minutes of sustained load, your RTX 5090 feels amazing for the first 20 to 30 minutes, and then it starts hitching, dropping clocks, even black screening. You're hitting thermal or power limits. The card is pulling itself back to protect the silicon. This is the silicon lottery. And in 2026, nobody is talking about it loudly enough. Every graphics card has a voltage frequency curve that determines how much voltage is applied at different clock speeds. Manufacturers set these curves conservatively to ensure stability across all chips, including the ones that need more voltage due to manufacturing variations. Some GPU chips simply run more efficiently than others. Translation: 2 RTX 5090 cards, same model, same box, same SKU. One runs at 1.05V under full boost. The other needs 1.12 Vs to hit the same clocks. And you have no way of knowing which one you got until it starts throttling on your desk. Earlier this year, an MSI RTX 5090 Lightning Z, a card retailing at $5,090, cracked during a 2500 watt extreme overclocking test when one part of the die remained extremely cold while another developed a hotspot, creating a temperature imbalance the silicon could not withstand. Roughly $5,000 was lost in a single moment. That's the extreme end. But the quiet, everyday version of this is happening on gaming rigs right now. Cards thermal throttling under sustained loads, frame rates dropping not because of bad game optimization, but because your chip, specifically your chip, drew the short straw in a semiconductor factory in Taiwan. Your card might crash at minus 150 millivolts, where your friend's identical card handles minus 200, same box, different silicon. Now layer Windows 11 on top of that. You have Copilot SVC burning CPU cycles in the background. You have DiagTrack packaging telemetry payloads and firing them at Microsoft servers. You have Windows Update doing pre-download staging of files you didn't request, at times you didn't authorize. Every one of those background processes is competing for the same DDR5 as 6400 memory bandwidth your GPU needs for frame delivery. And because Windows 11 now requires TPM 2.0, a trusted platform module that, in its current 2.0 spec, has known side channel vulnerabilities documented in CVE 2023-1017 and CVE 2023-1018, your system's security perimeter is already partially compromised at the firmware layer before a single process launches. This is exactly why your PC feels slow, not your hardware. Your operating system is parasitic. Pivot. Here's what Lenovo doesn't want you to know, and Dell, and HP. Quietly, without a press release, without a keynote, without a CES booth, ThinkPad engineers have been shipping a specific subset of their X1 Carbon and T-Series laptops with a Linux-ready UEFI configuration that bypasses the standard AIPC certification stack entirely. No mandatory Copilot button, no NPU requirement for the OS, no telemetry handshake embedded in the BIOS that calls home to Microsoft's activation servers. The repairable hardware movement, framework laptops, the Fairphone model applied to PC architecture, right to repair legislation passing in the EU, has finally forced the OEMs to hedge. They're covering their bets, because the migration numbers are no longer ignorable. Zorin OS 18 hit 2 million downloads in under 3 months since its October 2025 launch, with over 75% of those downloads coming from Windows users fleeing Windows 10's end of support. Read that again. 2 million downloads, 3 months. That implies roughly 1.5 million former Windows users reached for a Linux ISO instead of paying for an upgrade. Something genuinely different is happening with Linux adoption in 2026. It is not just market share numbers climbing to 4.7%, the highest they have ever been. The reasons for switching are becoming practical rather than ideological. People are not choosing Linux because they believe in open source philosophy. They are choosing it because their hardware still works, and they do not want to throw it away just because Microsoft changed the system requirements. And this is where the 30-day experiment begins, not with ideology, with a USB drive and a 23-minute installation. Day 1. U-boot Zorin OS 18.1. Released April 15th, 2026. The Zorin Appearance app lets you switch your entire desktop layout with one click. It looks like Windows. It navigates like Windows. Your muscle memory doesn't fire an alarm. The taskbar is at the bottom. The application menu is in the bottom left corner. Files open in a file manager that behaves like File Explorer. You spend 6 minutes wondering why you waited so long. Then you open a system monitor. And here's the moment that changes the next 30 days. Your RAM is sitting at 1.4 gigabytes used, not 6.2, not 7.8, 1.4, on the same machine that ran Windows 11 and consumed nearly a third of your DDR5 kit just to idle. No recall.exe, no Copilot SVC, no diagtrack packaging your browsing behavior into 43 kilobyte telemetry payloads and firing them at vortex.data.microsoft.com every 6 minutes. The network monitor is silent. Your machine is yours again. By day 3, you've discovered that your RTX 50 series card, the one that was thermal throttling under Windows, runs 5 to 8 degrees cooler under sustained load on Linux, because the display driver pipeline isn't competing with 3 AI inference services running simultaneously in the background, because nothing is scanning your screen every 5 seconds, because the VRAM bandwidth that recall.exe was consuming to store your screenshots locally is now going to your actual workload. Undervolting tests confirm what enthusiasts have suspected. A thermal reduction of 12 to 15 degrees Celsius is achievable with power savings around 17%. On Linux, with a clean driver stack and no background AI workloads, those gains are baseline, not enthusiast tuning, just the operating system getting out of its own way. By day 7, you've stopped dual booting. By day 14, the Windows partition feels like a foreign country you visited once and don't miss. By day 21, you realize the curiosity loop that kept you on Windows. The fear that something would break, that a driver wouldn't work, that a game wouldn't launch, never materialized. Windows to Linux migration is no longer a DIY weekend experiment. It is a practical, well-supported path for millions of users. And by day 30, your machine doesn't know your name. It doesn't have your Microsoft account. It doesn't have your telemetry ID, your advertising guide, your Cortana interaction history, or a screenshot database of every document you've opened since April 2025. Your TPM 2.0 chip sits idle, not being used to verify your identity to a corporation's activation server, not anchoring a surveillance architecture built on the premise that convenience is worth more than privacy. Nothing is phoning home, because there's no home to phone. Here's what 30 days in the private OS actually reveals. The real hidden kill switch was never a single process. It was the normalization of a model where your hardware, the silicon you paid for, the PCIe bandwidth you own, the DDR6 memory latency you spec'd at CL30 to squeeze every nanosecond of performance, was being quietly redirected to serve someone else's agenda. Microsoft is reportedly pulling back its Windows 11 AI push with a major Copilot and recall rethink. That sentence alone tells you everything. You don't rethink a feature people love. You rethink a feature that's driving 2 million people to download a competing operating system in 90 days. The repairable hardware wave is accelerating this. Framework's modular laptop architecture, swap your own RAM, replace your own display, upgrade your own CPU board, is antithetical to the locked-down AI PC ecosystem Microsoft needs to monetize recall. You can't run a surveillance-as-a-service operating system on hardware. Its owner controls completely. The two philosophies are incompatible. And the OEMs, slowly, are noticing which way the current is running. Lenovo's Linux-ready ThinkPads aren't a charity project. They're a hedge. Dell's XPS line shipping with Ubuntu pre-configured isn't altruism. It's actuarial math applied to market share projections. When an estimated 240 million computers are incompatible with Windows 11's hardware requirements and need alternative operating systems, the manufacturers who make it easy to run Linux inherit a market. The manufacturers who don't become the next cautionary tale at a CES panel nobody watches. Your RTX 5090 still has thermal issues. The silicon lottery is still real. The chip you got still pulls 575 watts stock and throttles if your case airflow is suboptimal. None of that changed. But on a clean Linux stack, without DiagTrack competing for your PCIe bus and Copilot SVC burning CPU cycles, on a model inference task you never asked for, the hardware you paid for is finally working for you. Not for Microsoft, not for the telemetry pipeline, not for the recall database growing silently on your NVMe drive at 11:14 p.m. while you thought your computer was sleeping. 30 days, one USB drive, 23 minutes to install, and a system monitor that reads 1.4 gigabytes RAM. Instead of proof that you were never really the user, you were always the product. Past tense, not anymore.